Welcome to Unfit Statesman with Zach Brown.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the show. Very special guest. I've been a fan of the platform for a while now. The person who led me to the platform, as anybody who's been following me for some time knows that I'm a huge fan of Whitney Webb. And I know that you have you collaborate. You have a good working relationship with Whitney. And was she publishing on TLAV?
Yeah, it's funny. It's funny you asked that. Well, she's a writer.
Okay. See, I told you I'm not a fucking professional. Sorry.
No. That's it's a good question. That's why the reason you ask it. It's good because people have had. So to get into it, she in a positive way. Whitney and I have worked together for a really long time. She's a writer for The Last American Vagabond. She still is. Yeah. And so she also runs Unlimited Hangout as her own independent platform where I will often overlap and work, come on her show and so on. But she is technically a writer for The Last American Vagabond and, part of the TLAV team. But what I pride myself on is with any of the people I work with, Derek Bros or, Robert or Taylor or anybody, it's important to me that I don't stifle what else they may want to do. You know what I mean? I really pride myself on that. And so when Whitney first left Mint Press News as a writer to come write for The Last American Vagabond, I really, obviously, we really flourished at that point. Her and I had some great content. She independently had some amazing stuff. And I was more than happy to help, cultivate or allow her to cultivate her own thing, which I'm glad she did because it's amazing, And so that's something that you don't really get with a lot of platforms. And I get why from like a business perspective, but as always, TLAV, it's all about the truth and the content and the objective, even sometimes at the expense of what might be beneficial for TLAV as a whole, and that's just what I think is most important today.
Right. Yeah. So, parlay this into plugs. Tell everybody who you are, where they can find you, and if you have anything, obviously, that you're working on. I doubt that. Yeah. Well, there might be some new people you could pull from me. I'm not very. I brush up against politics, but we're not very political. I mean, you're a legitimate journalist who does his due diligence and has an amazing capability to dig up information that the overwhelming majority of journalists can't.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, and by the way, it's funny that you mentioned Whitney Webb writing for Mint Press News. That's where the first time I ever had known of Whitney Webb was the Epstein thread that she had. And my very first episode, which was in 2020 of this podcast, it was basically me just plagiarizing everything she wrote on that thread about Epstein, and that's the first time I'd heard of Epstein too. So it was the whole thing was wild. But tell everybody about your platform, where they can find you.
Well, just thelastamericvanvagabond.com is the hub for all of this different work, and all of the different writers for the TLAV team. All that will funnel through the website itself. There's a lot of other places you could find us. Our Substack, all the different independent, or different respective platforms, Twitter, and so on. But as I always say, it's most important to don't let these platforms be sort of the conduit between you and our work. Because I think that's sort of one of the, like with Twitter right now, that's clearly a way that I think that we're being set up for failure. So go directly to the website. I think that's important. So you'll find all the information there to find everything else.
Yeah, I've intended to move, to get my own website and move off of Patreon into I need to. It's just me being lazy. It's just it does need to listen. Here's what I know is going to happen, and I know it because my day job, I'm a tech advisor. I talk to people about like cybersecurity constantly, and I talk to a lot of businesses where they're like, "Well, would they really target me?" And it's like, well, they're not really targeting, they're casting a wide net. And they're like, I don't think it's going to happen. And then they call me when it's happened, when they lost 50 grand in a breach. And then they go, we have to do this. And I'm like, it's too late. We can't do anything. We can start new and build from there, but it can't. I guarantee you, Patreon's going to say you violated this. You're not going to get any of this month and last month's. You're not going to be able to grandfather in these people. It's like it's going to happen to me, and then I'm going to go, I need to move now, and they're going to go, yeah, but you lost everything else. So it's
if you remember, that happened to both Whitney and I pretty much at the same time around the same general topic where we got booted off Patreon. And don't forget, one of the reasons I was really adamant, like, people need to see this about this platform and most of the rest of them in the same mindset. They enforced their policies in a really opaque, broad way regarding off-platform content, right? So you said this on Facebook, so we're censoring you on Patreon. That's what happened. And it was just about the broad, misinformation. And by the way, it was about something that we have been proven to be correct on, right? Myocarditis, I believe, was the argument, or I think it might have been blood clots. Either way, very obviously, we all acknowledge that was part of it, So I'm with you. It's hard because it's a very, very fluid platform. It works very well. It's very easy. The problem is that it's putting your eggs in that basket. And they took money from me. I never got back. Right. And they just shut it all down. And one thing they tend to do these days too is they'll stop you from being able to access your contacts. So you can't offload your emails after they'll censor you. So you can't just go somewhere else with all that information, because those are important. PayPal did the same thing too. They stole thousands of dollars from me. I never got it back.
Yeah. They're the Apple of web-based paywall platforms. It's just easy end user experience. And yeah, you're right. I mean, they certainly do have a certain amount of control. Obviously, if they're able to just tie up your funds and go, well,
yeah.
You're gonna have listeners complain to you that they paid for the month and didn't get 1 month's content. Well,
right. Well, they could do whatever they want. I mean, it's so wildly unaccountable, because they just have. When we've seen this, remember there was a time with YouTube where people would complain, be like, they censored this and they didn't even give me a reason. There's no process. And they're like, you're crazy. You're a conspiracy theory. There was a whole time where that was just completely disregarded. Now it's just common practice. And we don't, that always happens where the fake thing becomes provably real. And there's just a narrative why we need it now. We never really addressed that, but it's everywhere.
Looking back, I mean, I'm just trying to think as far as censorship and consequences of publicly displaying an opinion that is antithetical to the mainstream narrative. God, COVID really rapidly expedited those things. I mean, there's most certainly people who were censored before that. I'm not saying that was the start of it, but God damn it, did that fucking, I mean, that's like when the NFL introduced turf and people people move faster on turf. So it was just receivers were fucking flying, it's crazy. It's like, it was like the steroid era in the MLB with Barry Bonds and fucking Mark McGwire and Sammy Sosa. It was just fucking hitting 600-foot home runs. It's like COVID was the steroid to censorship, it seems.
Yeah, well, and it also had the negative effect of from their perspective of shaking people free, right? It was so disjointed. It was so ham-fisted and aggressive, right? So it happened so rapidly and so clumsily that so many people, which I still don't think they've recovered from, were seeing through the narrative. I see the same thing happening with Israel right now, which it's a positive thing, that people are now questioning what they're being told from places they've never usually questioned, but you're right. The censorship was unreal during that time. And it had already had, I think we'd already had Purge 1 and Purge 2 and whatever they get called, the times where YouTube surged. But yeah, this was just, but what was different about this more than anything is it wasn't just this fringe guy from some random thing. It was the leading cardiologist in the world. It's censored on YouTube. Yeah. It's whoa. And I think that's what really shook people.
And that's, by the way, where we first talked on the Unjected show, who has a very close relationship with the wellness company. Peter McCullough is heavily involved in that. And it's pretty insane. I think it's And it's funny because now those tactics, those really aggressive tactics, obviously didn't stop at the sunset of the COVID epidemic.
Right.
It was carried into other aspects of society and used strategically moving forward from there. It was a very similar situation to the Patriot Act.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It was this, Hegelian dialectic-ish thing where they're like, we have an emergency, we have to get something in place now that it was kind of implied that it was supposed to be temporary. We just got to get control of the situation, right? That's the whole thing. We just got to get it. Let's get a handle on things. Okay. And yes, for the time being, we're going to be a little fucking invasive and fucking controlling, but we just got to get a handle on things, right? That was sort of the theme, the umbrella theme of both, post 9/11 legislation and COVID. And so we saw a Patriot Act template placed over speech.
Yeah.
During COVID, it seems.
Yeah, it's a perfect analogy for it. And it's not just speech, really. It's the idea that in any time, look, emergencies happen. Like, let's not, pretend that there's always things that can organically happen and so on. But
I sharded like 3 weeks ago. Emergencies do happen, folks, and they happen when you least expect it. They do.
Right. But my point is that ultimately, whether you think this was organic or they ultimately took advantage of something that was happening, the point is the same, right? That you take the problem, reaction, solution, Hegelian dialectic point, that there's an agenda they want to achieve, right? So they initiate a problem, wait for you to react to it, and then they swing in with the art, hey, we got an answer for you. And so the point was they were engineering you into that position, and so it doesn't always have to start with whole cloth, but the point is the same, and that was the Patriot Act. Right. And there's same kind of dynamic where people argue one or the other, but clearly they took advantage of it. I think it's obvious they were involved, and the same thing now. And so the question is, was this achieved to, used to achieve this end? Was it just kind of a circumstance kind of situation? But I think either way, your rights have been removed under the guise of what they say they needed for emergency. And to your crux of your point, it's never going to go away. It's the same thing. And it's not, and we could probably find 15 other examples other than the Patriot Act and COVID. That's just how these governments operate. My thing I keep getting I'm so perplexed about is, how do we not recognize this as a population by now? A lot of us do. I think the majority, but yet weirdly enough, these things keep dragging themselves forward. It's about to happen again. Like, I sense another one of these happening right now in the context of the war dynamic, and somehow people will be dragged into it.
Yeah, it seems like there's the initial reaction, or just even a sustained reaction to emergencies in this country. They're very polar opposite, right? You either go, like most people like you and I probably go, this could be an emergency, but I guarantee you, they're going to use it to fuck us up.
Right.
And it may not even be an emergency. Or I'm terrified and I'm going to do everything authority tells me. Right. It doesn't seem like there's people in the middle that just kind of go, yeah, I don't know. I guess I'll wait till this plays out. We'll see. It seems like that mindset, and maybe I shouldn't say that. Maybe those people who think that way just aren't on social media or presenting their opinion to the public. Maybe they're just more, these are like middle America, people in West Virginia who never they live in hollers and didn't realize that there was 3 wars going on. Like, those people could have that very rational, logical mindset, but because they're not constantly displaying their opinion publicly, we just don't see it.
Well, that's a great point.
Yeah.
Well, that's just to add, so that's exactly right. I would say it's a mixed bag of that, as well as they're not being highlighted by the corporate media. But I would also argue that the way the system's designed, they're aggressively driven to take any side. Even if they're like, I'm not really sure, they just kind of like tentatively choose a side. That's not how that should ever be, but that's clearly driven. So a lot of them kind of fall in line, even though they're not really signing with it, So the perception becomes that everybody's involved. And you're right. I don't think it's the case.
Well, I mean, listen, speaking of political opinions, and taking a side. When I say we, the American, the American government echelon of society has decided for us that we're going to give another 95 billion and we're going to disperse it to Israel, Taiwan, and Ukraine. Now, I will say, just because we haven't given quite as much to Taiwan, I'm not as mad about Taiwan. But I think I have a listen, Ryan, I'm not articulate or smart enough to really dive in and be a political commentator. And I'm not funny enough to be a comedian. So I try to live in this weird gray area. And I do have a real opinion on this foreign aid package, though. And I think I can show a video about how I feel about it, about how I feel about the people who voted for it. Okay, let's take a listen.
Hello, you faggot! So you're a queer, aren't you? Fag! Queer! Faggot! What are you, a fag?
That's how I feel about the people who passed this bill. Now, if you're wondering what that video is, I don't know. I have seen it before, but my best guess is that it was probably a PSA to not be homophobic.
Right.
But that's how I feel. We're going to listen one more time. It's my opinion, and we're going to cement this into the archives here.
Gay. Hello, you faggot. So you're a queer, aren't you? Fag! Queer! Faggot! What are you, a fag?
Yeah, it's definitely like in a locker room at some school PSA.
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah, and the fat guy screams. I mean, the fat guy is, so here's what I'll say. If they were trying to promote, being accepting of gays, they only would have used the fat guy with the sunglasses on inside, the fat white guy with spiked up blonde hair and spiked up with the gel that makes your hair hard. And he's wearing a polo and he's obese, and he had some energy behind that faggot. Like that faggot had energy behind it. The rest were like, "What are you, gay?" Like they're like, "What do you do? You fucking what? You read gay?" But that guy, he seems upset, and that's by the way, I would say all of those characters are an amalgam of how I feel toward politicians having the fucking dick on them to tax me and then send the money overseas to a mixture of definitely Nazis in the Ukraine, Jews who can't get along with people, and I don't know anything about Taiwan, but I'm mad because they're not like me, like white. So I'm mad
right. Well, it's hilarious to me that's the one you don't care that you're like, I don't mind that one so much, but I know nothing about it.
That's why I don't care. I don't have anything about it. There's nothing that Taiwan has done that I've seen in the media where I've went, what the fuck are you doing?
Well, that's because you're supposed to support the agenda that you don't get shown. They're
true.
Not showing you all the negative things Ukraine do because they want you on Ukraine's side, right? There's usually, that's not to say that means explicitly that there are on there, but I agree overall that this is, people have, kind of called this the World War III bill, whatever. I mean, ultimately what you're doing is inciting more violence. What you're doing is first of all, Israel and Ukraine are two the best examples of this I've ever seen. If they stop funding them immediately, I mean, within weeks, these things would stop happening. Think about how wild that is. These are the two most before Israel and Gaza, the Ukraine was everyone's pulling their hair out, and rightly so. People are dying. There's ethnic, and just so it's clear, the Donbass has been ethnically cleansed for decades before we ever got to this point. So people that are paying attention are very aware this has been going on a long time. Just also to show you that they don't really care about these things if it's the right group of people. But
let me, because you're going to make a better point than I can, but I have a personal story, not personal, but it's a very funny thing that you mentioned that the Donbass region, which nobody even, you mentioned the Donbass, people don't even know what it is here. I used to work at a place, and this was 2021. When did the war start? 2022? I forget. This was after Russia had gone into the Ukraine. And my job had hired this, kid for summer work. And he was from the Ukraine. And our boss, who's not even politically engaged, he's just kind of always in his own world, he cares very little about what's happening overseas. He cares about his own money, right? Which is actually more admirable than people who are like, Ukraine needs to, and he kept like mentioning like the war to this Ukrainian kid. And I was like, and I'd hear it and I'm like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
This is insane. And then I guess at some point, this guy, by the way, this kid had moved from the Ukraine maybe 6 years ago, right? 6 years prior. And so he starts this job. The boss keeps mentioning things about the war, and then for whatever reason. And this was, I forgot about this part. So he starts this fucking like donation thing, this drive to give money to the Ukraine at the job, with this local job. It's not going to make any money, but he's like, it's clearly like a marketing thing, try to get out to the community. And we're working on that, and then the boss learns like 2 words in Ukrainian, and then goes up to the Ukrainian kid, says the 2 words, and the kid's like, what? I don't know what. And then he goes, that's Ukrainian for something. And he goes, I don't speak that. I speak Russian.
Right.
And I in my mind, I went, holy fuck, he's from the Donbass region. And he came here because they were getting shelled. That's probably why they fled. So this motherfucker's been talking to this kid about pro-Ukrainian stuff.
Jeez.
And he's from a region where they speak Russian, the region that Russia is defending against the western part of Ukraine in their civil war. So and I saw it unfold, and I just kind of like, I couldn't believe it, because it was like, I can't believe how geopolitical, like serious geopolitical situations have somehow made it back to my life. This is insane.
Well, it's such a great, like, well, it definitely could be from some other, even like Crimea, there's an overlap, but even places that aren't there. But to just assume for sake of conversation, he's from the Donbass, it's a good point to make that, first of all, the guy at the boss, my opinion would be that it's just like virtue signaling. He just wants to be I care. I'm the one. Look at me. I'm a good person. Let's talk about what your plight is, because, I'm supposed to care about this. But it's just so ridiculous that this entire time, you're yelling your narrative at him, and it turns out he's like, how about this? How about he had spoken up right in the beginning and was like, oh, well, I support Russia's doing. Like you're
well, then he wouldn't have hired him
after that. And it's like, well, it just shows you how petty and out of the know. Like, Americans in that position are the worst, and really just anybody in the world who is acting in a way like they know what's going on because they're just like regurgitating what they're being told about a story. It's just so feeble and bad. But it happens all over the place. But that's so sad too. He probably just dealt with it, if that's the case,
Yeah, well, he was a really nice, he was a very quiet, shy kid. So he definitely, he wasn't going to say anything. And by the way, I shouldn't say, when I said he's from the Donbass, I have no idea. I didn't ask him.
Yeah.
I assumed that because he spoke Russian, he was from an area that was probably more culturally Russian. And if you look at the demographic map of Ukraine, those who speak Russian, if you were to ask them, who do you support in this war, the majority would say Russia. So I shouldn't assume, but I am going to assume.
It's a good point to make the point for the conversation. But you're right.
Yeah.
It's more likely that he's from those areas, I would say. But there's a pretty broad overlap of those two languages there. But it also just goes to show you how crazy it is when Ukraine literally like makes it illegal to speak Russian. You're not allowed to have a Russian flag, and like nobody seems to care about that. You know, it's like all these double standards everywhere. It's very
yeah. And by the way, people who like Zelensky kind of ran on a platform of being, peaceful and coexisting with those who want to be pro-Russian culture. They want to live their life as Russian culture. And then, McCain and I think Cheney over there. It was like McCain and fucking Lindsey Graham. Yeah, Lindsey Graham.
I got that video actually. If you want to play it.
And if you want to, play it. Victoria Nuland. I don't know. She's fucking gross either way.
Yeah.
She's not attractive. Okay, and that's the only way we judge female politicians on the show. We have no interest in judging them based on merit. It's simply superficial. That's all it is. They went over there and they got into his head. They said, hey, Vlad, whatever. We got a little fucking cash for you. And so shut the fuck up about what you're doing, okay? We're going to be pro-NATO. We're going to be Western facing, right? The only way we can make this work is, we've laid the tracks with Euromaidan, and we need you to go along. And if you don't go along, we can't achieve our goals. And we have a very nice incentive for you if you can help us achieve our goals. And that's what he did. And it was a crime of opportunity, really.
Yeah, I tend to think that it's obvious he's a puppet in this scenario, but the question is whether or not he actually embodies and believes in what the agenda is, or if he's just like an actual puppet. And I think that's more likely the way this goes forward. Let's not forget that he was threatened by the Azov movement in the beginning. They didn't take him seriously, and I think what makes more sense in all of this is that he was used, one, because he's Jewish, because let's not forget that the Israeli government has been funding the Azov movement going back well before, far as back as you could look. In 2018, multiple human rights groups in Israel spoke up. It's published in Haaretz and Times of Israel saying, please stop funding these neo-Nazis. Like, it's ridiculous when you think about that we don't talk about how weird that contrast would be. And or someone like Kolomoisky, who's the chief backer of the Azov movement. He's also the chief financier of Zelensky's campaign. He ran the 1+1 media station, which, by the way, his team later became Zelensky's cabinet. Talk about wag the dog. It's an actual TV production team that's what you can look it up on Wikipedia. How ridiculous is that? But Kolomoisky was the head of the World Jewish Congress. I think there's an agenda to play out here about making the argument that, he can't be that because he's Jewish, even though there were Jewish collaborators during the war. So it doesn't really make sense, but it's a narrative that stuck, and I think we're seeing the overlaps with this to a lot of other conversations, which that's a huge conversation to get into. But I believe that this was much bigger. Ukraine didn't work out the way they wanted it to. There was supposed to be a larger agenda that blamed Russia and Americans.
There wasn't there a leak. There was a leak of like a blueprint where it was so blatant, the leak, that Fox News, didn't they put out like a statement where they were saying, we're not going to cover this? And what's his face? What's that old white guy that goes onto the podium for Biden every once in a while?
McConnell?
No.
Goes on for Biden. Huh,
yeah. Sure. He's like a speaker for the defense agencies for Biden. God damn it, I can't remember.
It's not Blinken, is it?
No, it's not Blinken. It's the guy whose wife died, and he was at the press conference the next that afternoon.
I don't remember.
I don't know either. But basically, he said, "Don't cover this." It's so crazy blatant.
What was the leak? I'm just not remembering the leak.
It was a blueprint for basically goading Russia into a war. I think the attempt was to basically make it seem to the world that NATO, by giving Ukraine NATO status, we were doing this on a goodwill, a moral justification. And then obviously, if you're in, I mean, Ukraine is a very strategic military point on the map, and they have insane amounts of natural resources. It basically came out as a blueprint for, I think, BlackRock, right? So obviously, even if Ukraine is not a part of NATO, they're going to be they're NATO adjacent at this point, and
they might as well be NATO based on the way they engage.
Right, and so they certainly engage in the weapons standard operating procedure of weaponry for NATO, which gives contracts to Northrop Grumman and Raytheon and Boeing and General Dynamic and what's the L one? I don't even know. Lockheed Martin. And so and by the way, every single one of those countries, by the way, the majority shareholder is BlackRock.
Always.
They are all of the money that we're giving Ukraine. I forget where I heard all of this, but I did hear it, and I have no idea if it's true, but I think it's probably true. All the money that we're giving Ukraine, we are classifying as loans. Now, anybody with any intelligence goes, there's no way that's going to get paid back. Well, that they put their national assets up for sale, their government assets, and one of the government assets that people have fought for over a period of thousands of years is their farmland. The farmland in Ukraine is the most. It's like one of the most massive plots of farmland in the world. It's one of the most fertile, and they've already put up 30% of it. By the way, they've already put up 30% of that farmland and sold it to DuPont, Monsanto, and then there was another one that I don't remember. But guess who's the majority shareholder for DuPont and Monsanto? It's BlackRock. And then the U.S. government.
Are those 2 points confirmed? Just for my own knowledge, that the Monsanto and the land. Are you sure of that part?
I'll
have to look into it because that's interesting.
Anything that I say, please look into because I tell lies constantly, but I think this one is true. I think so, and I think this was contained in that Ukraine blueprint, which was, by the way, it was put together supposedly quite a long time ago.
Yeah,
and then obviously, so BlackRock is the majority shareholder for those two. So it's and then the contract for the rebuilding of Ukraine was given to BlackRock, and so it seems like this was a ploy to create a money laundering scheme for BlackRock, who then obviously would give kickbacks to the politicians that went along with it. That's what it seems like.
Well, I mean, we have to remember that I don't think it's ever, especially today, ever one thing anymore. If it ever was, right? Like it's like that just as well could be like the primary mindset for people with assets in BlackRock or BlackRock itself. And just, the fact that this was going to be done, like, let's just say for sake of conversation, the primary objective was the biolabs and the medical freedom direction and the nanotechnology, whatever, all that stuff, and this just happened to be overlapped. And they said, well, we're going to be able to access all this property. What are we going to do with that? And you can see all these vying agendas, or again, the larger point about the dynamics of foreign policy with Russia, like they did with Afghanistan and the Taliban miring the Soviet Union. It's the same dynamic. It's public discussions. Foreign Policy wrote an article about it, trying to pull them in to mire them here for their own benefit. And then from there, utilize the Azov movement proxy army to sort of blame them for creating white supremacy, which then would bleed over into the conversation in the United States. I don't know if you know this, but the Rise Above movement, who was the primary marching group at the Charlottesville March, they will not replace us and all of that. That was the arm of the Azov movement. So, arm Azov movement is literally, and I can prove it with CIA documents, foundationally funded and created by the CIA. So there's this long-term plan where you can see this entity that was used to sort of spur up this whole Republicans are white supremacists and vanilla ISIS. I just don't think it ever really, it didn't happen the way it was planned. My point was that's a huge thing, but that very well could have been a side agenda to something bigger that we're talking about. They're all happening simultaneously.
I knew that, I mean, there were strong traces of American intelligence in the Azov movement. Was it before or during the Euromaidan thing? that they kind of way before. Okay.
Project Aerodynamic was, I think it was 1940. I could grab it real quick. I haven't looked at it in a minute. 1 second. But it's, I just want to get the exact date right. But so in a long time ago, the CIA basically created, or rather decided to fund and arm and bolster a fascist movement in order to sort of supplant and mire Russia, at the time Soviet Union, in this dynamic. And this was utilizing a person named Mykola Lebed, who was a Nazi war criminal, like an actual Nazi. That's why when I talk about this and I make it clear, in this dynamic as of today, there are fascists, there are neo-Nazi groups, and there's also actual Nazis. Like, it's not like, let's remember that, because those terms have meaning. You know, Mykola Lebed, who was rescued from Poland by the United States government, was put up in both in New York and in Ukraine, running a company called Prologue. It was a media company. Now imagine the mindset of Americans at that time if they knew your government, our government, had hired a Nazi war criminal and allowed him to propagate media through their apparatus to people in New York and the world. So the point was that built using the group called the Organization for Ukrainian Nationalists, which is a pretty prominent group you can look up. They're openly fascist. They've used that to build into what today becomes the Azov movement, the right sector, all these different parts of it. This is all on the record. It's public information. The point is, did that continue to this point? And I think we can easily prove that with other articles and even CIA documentation where they're writing about how they're going to utilize these. And let's not forget, these were all called Nazis like 30 seconds before this all started. And then it was like, what Nazis? What are you talking about? Like, it was really embarrassing, you know? So I think it's very clear. I'll grab that document. Well, it's 1948 was the year it started.
Oh, okay. Well, that makes sense. I mean, during, I forget it's like Operation Barbarossa, I think was the name of when Germany is the largest military invasion in the history of the world. They were going to go into St. Petersburg and Moscow and what's that? Stalingrad? Is that another city in Russia somewhere? And a lot of people in Western Ukraine joined the Nazis, and one of them was Stepan Banderas, I believe his name was, and Bandera, yeah, and he kind of created this movement. There were statues. There are still statues that are, they're still up. Nobody's tearing down.
Banderas praised roundly in groups like the Azov movement and the Right Sector, which, let's not forget, for those who don't know this part of it, they argue once this started that the Azov battalion like fizzled out. It's not what happened. The Azov movement became a fixture within the government. They're part of the police apparatus. They're part of the government. They're part of, I mean, they have a whole government apparatus within it, but then they're also the militias. So the Azov movement is the right way to see this. So that's part of the illusion as well. It like literally cemented itself with the larger government apparatus that is Ukraine today. You know, so that's what's so crazy is like they're embedded within it. Your governments are literally funding, arming, and supporting and obfuscating for this group. Now, this was a document put out in 1966 by the CIA, which overlaps this whole point. But the actual beginning of Project Aerodynamic was 1948. You can read through this; it's all explicit, and it talks about Mykola Lebed. You know, it's wild how this stuff is. You know, like
this is a CIA document.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think I have it on my. That's not the one. No, yeah, this is right from CIA.gov. I have it also downloaded on my website. Yeah, you can see on the URL.
Declassified and released by Central Intelligence Agency sources, methods, exemption 3B2B Nazi War Crimes Disclosure Act, date 2007. So 2007 this came out.
Well, no, I mean the actual documents. Oh, you mean it might have been publicly put out in this way.
Yeah,
the documents to 1966. The operation goes back to 1948. I gave you my link to the article as well. You have to bring it up, but just include it for people because it goes over all of the different background source material. I mean, it's so wild to read all this stuff, you know, and how provable it is, and then especially trying to gaslight people into thinking that this is not something that one is even real or that they're involved with. You know, and then we have to figure out how they would use that against their adversaries. And, you know, we already see it. The Taliban in Afghanistan are a perfect example of what they did. And then they just dropped them, right? And let the warlords take over. And then they came back later and took advantage of it. I mean, you know, our government are not what we pretend they are.
Yeah. I mean, it's for anybody, just if you have any doubts about the Nazi ties in Ukraine, I would start with Operation Barbarossa, move to like Stepan Bandera, and then there was I forget the guy's name. Maybe it was he's part of the right sector, the political party, Ole Tjanabok or something like that.
Oh, Tjanabok. Yeah, that's one of the earliest examples. Like, here's if you want, I should play this one actually. Let me grab a Oh,
can you share? Can you share directly from your computer? You can just share
actually,
it.
I can, but I can't share from my loaded videos that I have on StreamYard, which is where it is. That's too bad.
Gotcha.
Oh well, I can send it to you though. But it's a great clip that was put out by Stormcloud's Gathering. I wish that guy was still making videos. I mean, at least not. I haven't seen any, but where he basically, and this was again stuff that's out there, but it's not leaned into by the corporate media. Where where on the record you have a leaked recording between, I believe it was the foreign minister of Estonia and Cathy Ashton of the UK, and where he is literally going, look, we have the evidence, and I'm paraphrasing, that the people could, for those who don't remember the story, just like the U.S. government's done many other places like Syria, there were people being shot at the protest. They said it was Ukraine, it was the government they didn't want there that was doing it. They used that as the excuse to carry out the coup. That's what happened in the Maidan, massacre and all that. The point was that it turns out that was their government. That was the United States, their assets, and who they supported, shooting their own people in the square and then blaming that on them. That's what he said. And she literally goes, yeah. And that's it. Like, it's just, and then from there, the video shows you Newland literally, and another leaked recording, hand-picking who they're going to, and Tony Book was one of the people they were discussing, being put in position in the government. That was presented to the world as a democratic election. They literally like this one. This one. That's what our government does, man. And these are the people that we're now acknowledging as like the worst, like these Nazi elements.
Yeah. Well, I know. Here's. I'll cap this off with a kind of a funny thing, and then we'll pivot. It is Valentine's Day, Ryan. We do have to pivot. The Peace Corps. They were sending people over there, and to the POCs of the Peace Corps, they sent out a memorandum that basically said, "Hey, they're gonna say it. They're gonna say the word. They're gonna call you." Yeah, they did. They sent out a memo to black members of the Peace Corps and said, "If you go over there, they're gonna say it, and they're gonna say it with the R." It was basically, and that's a summation of what it actually was, but it was an acknowledgement of, hey, these people, not a bastion of progressive thought.
But it's a cultural difference. It's a cultural difference. Sort of like when they told you that when Afghan warlords were raping little boys, it's culture, guys.
Yeah.
It's a difference of culture.
Guys,
it's so ridiculous.
Guys, listen, sometimes you got to bolster kid rapists to get other kid rapists who we don't like.
Hey, ask the FBI. They know they do it well or not.
So, I don't want to use kid rape as a parlay into Valentine's Day, but it is Valentine's Day, and I'm going to read you it's not a Valentine's Day article, but it is an article that applies to Valentine's Day. And since we're already talking about immoral sexual behavior and how I parlayed that into Valentine's Day, we might as well talk about a little bit more immoral sexual behavior. This was a headline. I'm going to read you the headline and then a little snippet of the article from Rolling Stone. It's written by Ryan Bort. Having sex with your dog doesn't mean you're into bestiality. One night of experimentation shouldn't define who I am, especially if my dogs seem to enjoy it. I still think about my dog. What? Oh, yeah. I still think about my dog when I'm in the shower or eating peanut butter, but they won't let me visit the animal shelter anymore.
That can't be real. That's real.
So again, probably not. Although I will say I looked into Ryan Bort. He is a writer for the Rolling Stone. I don't know. Listen, I have never claimed to be accurate on this show, and it makes things kind of difficult because sometimes we talk about like real things about like the Ukraine, and then I read like this, and it might be real, it might not be, but it is Valentine's Day. so it's time to choose to give love to the people who you believe deserve it. Everybody out there, Ryan, me, we need to start giving love to the people that we believe deserve it. And so I would ask, in the context of the theme of which we've been talking, I'm assuming you would say that the people of Gaza probably need some love right now. I would say the people of Tucson need some love because they just haven't. I mean, I don't know what's going on over there. They got everybody's sunburned and skin cancer riddled, and all of their houses are on wheels. I don't know what's going on over there. It makes Flagstaff look like fucking Redondo Beach, whatever. Who deserves love, Ryan? In the context of the geopolitical sphere, who do we need to start giving a little bit more love to?
I'm still reeling off of your transition from that article into this topic.
Well, listen, love is in the air. Now, where the air, it's a very, where any aero, what did they call it when it was COVID? It was aero particles or aero molecular, whatever. You can see it disperses easily. And so it clearly landed in a weird place with this Ryan Bort, if it's real or not. God pray for that dog. Hopefully it's we at least hope it's like a big dog, right? We hope that it's like a husky or something, right? A little more room in there. Yeah. But who deserves a little bit more love? Now, like there's the obvious Gaza, but outside of maybe Gaza, who's deserving of America's love, or at least mercy? We'll say mercy. All right.
It depends on, America's love tends to translate as murdering people these days. So it's hard to, but if the question is legitimate kindness and lack of murder and,
I should say, who deserves American apathy? That's actually. Yeah.
Well, I mean, from an honest perspective, I mean, obviously any place that they're elite, Yemen, obviously the starvation tactics that still go on to some degree in Venezuela, the ongoing theft, rape, and murder that takes place in Syria every day, and the theft of their resources, or still in Afghanistan for that matter. We don't talk about the locations that we pretend aren't really happening anymore, but there's still all sorts of terrible things that go on at the behest of the U.S. government, as well as resource theft, as well as the, unaccountable sort of like Blackwater Academy, elements that still get utilized. But, those kind of things, like all these locations that are being abused for their resources, like in all of the African continent, to be kept at a level of like absolute destitute and starvation while they have some of the most resource, they're some of the most resource rich places on the planet. And yet it's not their fault. These countries have been like that, so that's what I would say is these places that are, artificially kept, in a place like that, or are being bombed when they don't, everywhere the U.S. government's involved. Let's put it that way.
Anywhere there's a military base, pretty much.
Yeah, it seems that way. Or the biological manipulation going on in places where they've got the labs in Africa and Georgia and, all over the world.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I always forget about that one. I always forget about the 90s. I was born in 96. So for whatever reason, every time I look into anything historical, I just skip from 90 to 2000. History begins at like ancient Sumeria, ends at 1990, and then picks up again in 2001 on 9/11. Basically, for me, everything in between that is just I have no idea what happened. You could tell me that those years didn't exist, and I'd go, "Yep, yeah."
What, drug induced? What was the?
Well, yeah, it was. I for the first 6 years, from 90 to 96, I wasn't alive, and then 96 to 2001, and I was 5. I was in kindergarten when 9/11 happened, and they sent us home early. If I'm remembering it correctly, they did send us home early, and I was like, "Fucking great!"
Right,
early day? Are you kidding me? Come on, man! Easily a great day. And obviously, it is funny, though, because for those of us who didn't absorb 9/11 as an adult, came out the other end of only studying it from retrospect.
Mm-hmm.
And when you study it from retrospect, outside of like the school, lessons, you definitely are way more willing to go, oh yeah, our government probably definitely knew about it. The Saudis were involved. It seems like Israel was involved. Like it definitely probably a more logical conclusion than anybody who went through it, because the emotion isn't there.
Yeah, that's the key tool, man. In any one of these situations, any one of these large events, they're very aware that social engineers, whatever you want to talk about, that emotion will usually circumvents logic. I mean, I make the point about, growing up where, you hear some kind of a rumor and you react badly and then you go, oh, I'm sorry. I jumped the gun. That's what it is right there. We all do that. And it's because your emotion, it boils up and all of a sudden, and if they can keep you in this state perpetually of like this constant, what's happening? It's right around the corner. It's going to happen. There's not going to be election. They're going to kill him. Then you're going to make irrational two-party blindness choices. That's what I would argue.
Yeah. Staying on the love theme, there is a lack of love on the right now. There's some infighting, and I enjoy listen, folks, you know me. I enjoy inter-party fights. I enjoy that. It's one of my favorite fights. The right versus the left, it's too bland these days. It's too boring.
The same old things on cycle.
Yeah. So at the very least, give me inter-party fights. Let's take a listen to, I don't know if this is Tucker Carlson's show or hit him on somebody else, but let's take a listen to what he has to say.
Children. So if you're playing recklessly, fast and loose with their lives, then I have a right to despise you. And I do. Yeah. So if you're Nikki Haley, who's running for president, or Ben Shapiro, or half the people I see on television casually mentioning the possibility of nuclear war or sending Americans to fight in the Middle East, or in any way involving us in a war that has nothing to do with prosperity and peace at home, nothing, in other words, to do with us, Americans, then I have a right to call you out and be really offended because it's my family. They live here. It's not a joke to me. There's nothing abstract about it.
And this was Ben Shapiro's response to this video. I'm going to read it. Tucker is simply lying about my positions. I've been calling for a negotiated end to the Ukraine war, freezing the lines of conflict since early on in the war. I have never called for American boots on the ground in Ukraine. I have never called for American boots to defend Israel ever. So the last line, I don't have evidence right now to present against it, but I feel like it's not true.
Yeah, right. Or that he's insinuated otherwise many times.
Yeah, I feel like Ben Shapiro maybe has said that it's important for America to constantly defend Israel. I feel
right. What you could point, that's a great point to make, is that the statements that are made are so absolute and so all-encompassing. They always are, but they're usually broad and kind of undefined. But if you're going to say that we'll do anything or we're there no matter what, well, that implies that you would do that if it came to that and there was a need for it, right? So just because they haven't explicitly said, I want boots on the ground, are we going to pretend that if something very, like, let's just say all of a sudden some massive force invaded right in Tel Aviv, that Ben wouldn't be calling for U.S. boots? Of course he would. You know he would, right? So it's a lie.
But this is what he said. I've invited Tucker to sit down multiple times over the past few weeks to clear the air and discuss our differences. He said he's willing, but his team has told us that he's busy for months because of all his foreign travel. That offer remains open. Now, I would enjoy seeing like a true debate between Tucker Carlson and Ben Shapiro, because Shapiro has a very good, like, strategically, he's very methodical in the way he debates. He's just a really good debater. He has debate skills. Tucker Carlson has more ideas that resonate with, I think, probably more people on the right and the left. So I think he's sitting in a better position to win the minds and hearts of the people listening to the debate. But because Ben's such a fucking nerd, he's a robot. I mean, it'd be tough. Who do you think would win that?
Well, you're making an excellent point there. And this is something, if anybody out there has ever taken like procedural, like even like in a law setting or like, like debate in general, that you learn that somebody can be you can be like have no clue about like, well, I mean, you have to understand like the topics, but like not really be invested or understand one or the other, but be such a good debater that you can still win the debate just by using certain tactics, right? And but you know, a dumb person probably couldn't pull it off, but someone who's intelligent, like you could step in that day and just briefly look up both sides and be such a good debater that you could effectively possibly win, you know. And I think that's a good thing to consider. So I do agree that Ben is good at the you know, the language aspect of it, but I do not think that he these days more than ever. I used to think he was I think he's a smart guy, but I don't see it as much these days, and I'm wondering if I overestimated that for a lot of different reasons. But if I had to pick, I would probably say that Ben Shapiro would win if it was between them. Like, but here's the problem. And that shouldn't be taken as I support either of them. I think they're both ridiculous, quite frankly. But what's interesting is
from like a cold observer perspective,
right? What's interesting about it, though, if from that, I would probably go with Ben, but it'd be a small margin. But my point would be that with this, even within the right versus right, you're going to have people that before it ever begins have already picked who they're going to side with. You know how this works these days. It's going to be the Tucker fans versus the Bens, and they're all going to say, "Hey, he won. It's so clear. He got destroyed." And that's just always how these things go. So it's just so weird the way that works today. But I don't know. I find that both of them acting like they care about, like Tucker, in my opinion, the way all this is about, I don't think it's real. I think this is about trying to continue to frame himself as being like this new shining light in the interest of the truth. I don't believe it. I hope I'm wrong. I always do. I just don't take it seriously.
I think he saw a tunnel of opportunity with the Trump movement where he realized that there were underlying aspects of a populist ideology that could really catch on. And so I think he saw, I mean, he runs downhill. It's what they say. When a linebacker or when a running back finds a hole, if he runs downhill, he hits the hole hard and he plows over whoever's going to get in his way. That seems to me what Tucker is doing, because even if, you know, obviously Trump doesn't embody a populist movement, right? He has talking points that are aligned with it, but he's not a beacon of shining hope by any means at all. But I think with the Trump presidency, Tucker saw that. He goes, there's an area for this. This is where I can separate myself. Right. And I think he took that opportunity. You know, prior to Trump, Carlson was, I mean, fucking, he was like Sean Hannity. He was, you know, right. He was Bill. I mean, quite honestly, just by the way he broadcasts, he kind of took a lot from Bill O'Reilly. His cadences he took from Limbaugh. He softened his language a bit. But yeah, I think this is opportunistic. I don't think Tucker Carlson really can relate to people, you know, like people who actually feel some of the things that he's talking about. And I guess the question becomes, Ryan, are we going to be a monolith of ethics when it comes to, you know, whatever pseudo movement you and I are a part of, I guess? And by the way, maybe I'm not. I probably am harmful to the movement. But, you know, a freedom, you know, like transparency in government, limiting federal government power, you know, ending wars, you know, exposing the wrongdoings of the government that are happening now and that have happened in the past. You know, all of those ideas. Do we take what we can get from Tucker and say good, bad, cut it off, which can become hard to pick up support and create and garner, you know, support because it's very nuanced and it's not very soundbite-ish, because it's Tucker's living in this weird gray area with this? Or do we object it completely and go, yeah, he has some good ideas, but no, he's not us? Or do we just pick and choose? So what's the best method to move the ideology forward, right? Is it saying, is it involving yourself to the point where you're going to Tucker Carlson or somebody like RFK and say, hey, good on the vaccines, bad on Israel? You know what I mean? Like, is it better to just be a monolith and say yes or no completely, or is nuance worth it?
No, it's always worth it. I mean, this is the same thing. This is the overall point of my main mantra, which, question everything, but the real extension of that is while considering every possibility, right? People tend to misinterpret that as be like dismissing everything. I don't know where that ever comes from. The point is that we should be considering everything, what Fox said, what CNN said, what Tucker's putting forward, because what it all really comes back to is the source material, right? Because it doesn't matter what claim is being made, who is saying it. What Tucker just said, this is the claim. Here's what the main point is. Where is that coming from, right? So if that moment, no matter who put it forward, I don't care if it was Goebbels himself, right? The point is that it's something that can either be verified or not. And so you find that point, you go to its logical conclusion, and from there, you decide whether it's something that is valid. And if it's not, or you can't prove it, you move forward. Now, you can, I do it all the time in a show where I go, and so-and-so said this. Now, it's not something I can verify. Like, discussion is okay. But my point is, it doesn't matter who said it, whether it's Tucker or Ben or me or you, we should engage with it honestly, do the due diligence the same way every time. The problem is that people today are just not willing to do that, don't want to, don't think it's necessary. Twitter Files has completely warped people's mind about what they think is valid journalism. It's all screenshots that we don't need to verify anymore as long as the person said it, I trust.
That's literally what that was a screenshot. That dog fucking article, that was a screenshot. I am literally what you're telling people not to be.
Credit where it's due. You're very open about the fact that it's for fun and that you're not claiming that you're not making big statements after that like this because of, look, I've always said this. If some people can do what we do in like a different realm of it, and like, for instance, like have somebody who wants to have fun with this and it's not in this, I take it very seriously. And I think it's because I talk about a very, very serious things that really, but if somebody wants to come out and do it for a different reason, I'm not going to begrudge that. Have fun with it. As long as it's clear that you're not there's a lot of these people that try to straddle that line where they're like, hey, I'm just a comedian. I don't really, but then clearly play into the fact that they have standing and you took my work and, and so I respect what you're doing and the way you're doing it. You know what I mean? I really do. And I think that's important because it's just about being honest with people, man. That's what people want today. It's so refreshing to find somebody who is just transparently who they are and they own it. It seems rare, but it shouldn't be.
Well, we're on an hour. And this perfectly, what you just said parlays into the video that I want to show to wrap this up. This is somebody who is who they are. This is somebody who is not afraid to express who they are. And I think, although it may not perfectly align with what everybody's feeling about the government, right? And when I say everybody, our audience, because now yours is mine, and you got to tell everybody to come over to mine because you have a lot more. Get over here. It shows a fed upness with what's happening. And I know for the folks who listen to my show, I've played this already, but you better get used to it because I'm going to be playing it a lot. So I believe that this gentleman is to be idolized. And this is just my opinion. Okay, let's take a listen.
Just a moment, you just assured me that I could speak.
Sit down inside the car. We're not assuring anything. We're under arrest.
Look, I'm under what? Gentlemen, this is Democracy Manifest. Have a look at the headlock here. See that chap over there? Get your hand off my penis! This is the bloke who got me on the penis before. Why did you do this to me? In the car. Some cups. For what reason? What is the charge? Eating a meal? A succulent Chinese meal? Oh, that's a nice headlock, sir. Oh, yes. I see that you know your judo well. Good one. And you, sir, are you waiting to receive my limp penis? How dare get your hands off me. Ta-ta and farewell. One cup, look. They even...
God, is that I want that to be real. I can't tell if it's fake or not.
No, it is real. It is real.
Because it's hilarious.
Yeah, they did like a whole write-up on him. They say that he, I don't know, his demeanor changed when he saw the cameras.
Mm-hmm.
And then he was just going to go along with it, but then he saw it, and then so I don't know if he himself is authentic, but the video is.
Yeah, like I wonder if he's acting or like if that's really how he speaks. It's so funny, like the almost calm demeanor of the way certain things. That's funny.
Here's what I will say: in that scenario, calm, cool, and collected.
Yeah,
I mean, I couldn't have thought of that string of words. It's fucking hilarious.
Yeah.
And I think one line in there that you and I and everybody who listens to you and me can agree on when speaking to government authority: get your hands off my penis. and that could be meant metaphorically. I mean, you're taking my money and throwing it over to a war that I don't give it. Get your hands off my penis.
Start the hashtag.
Yeah. Yes. You've got your hand on my penis.
Well, it reminds me of what was that? Was that Half Baked? The guy's like, "Back up, man! You're standing on my dick, man." Remember that? It's like from like a '90s movie. It wasn't obvious. It was more of like, obviously it was a metaphor, but the point was you're standing close to me. It's the same kind of point, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Was it?
I don't know. I've never seen Half Baked, so I don't know.
Wow, that's a funny movie.
This is Democracy Manifest.
Yeah, I like that.
It's great. It's great. I love how he goes, "Get your hands off my penis," and he like turns to the camera. He goes, "This is the bloke who got me on the penis, folks."
Yeah, right. It's very calm.
It's funny. Yeah. He's like his head's being pushed, and he goes, "Ah, yes, I see. You know your judo well."
Yeah, right. So it's so strange.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about calm under pressure. He's fucking. You talk like you think Napoleon would have been had the temperament to be a war general, being calm under pressure, calm and strategic under pressure. That guy, that fucking guy, he would have been worse than Genghis Khan. It's fucking you give him any power in the early 19th century, you've got a story.
Yeah. And just his voice too, like it makes it so much better that it's a British accent.
Yeah,
just like the way it's just, it gives it like an air of like what not respectability, but like
intellect
or something. Yeah,
perceived intellect. Yeah,
that's funny.
Yeah, God forbid somebody can enjoy a succulent Chinese meal these days, folks. But yeah, I think it embodies the free thought spirit.
Yes.
And you do a very good, like I said, as far as journalists go and researchers go, when it comes to, like I tell everybody all the time, never rely on me as a news source, for God's sake, please. I mean, for Christ, CNN's probably more accurate than me.
Yeah, I doubt it.
Yeah, it's but the Last American Vagabond is a very, very good source. I think you and I forget the guy who was like on Fox News talking about Assad and the false chemical attacks in Syria. I forget his name. God damn it.
Robert Fisk, maybe. There was a couple different people that stood out during that.
Could have been.
He was from The Independent, where he kind of stood out and argued that, he's one of the people that really made that. Everybody else was saying that it was what the narrative was, and he went to Syria and was like, no, it's not. And I think he, never really got the same clout after that from the mainstream, which is usually how it goes. But
yeah,
sorry, go ahead.
But no, I was just saying that as far as if you do want a news source that one focuses on things that are important, right? They're not talking about transgender bathrooms, and you want some comfortability that you're getting good, accurate information. And if it's not accurate information, they would certainly come back and say, "Hey, this was fucked up. This is now what we know." The Last American Vagabond is top tier, truly.
Thanks, man. I
And
appreciate that.
I don't read it enough because I don't read enough in general. But you have audio platforms as well, and yeah, tell everybody audio, because true, like I said, it's if you had to narrow it down, you're busy, folks are busy, it's hard to just try to disperse, like you said, ideally you would get ideas from every single platform and then formulate your own opinion on it, but it becomes tough. It's people have families, people have jobs, so you if you're going to pick one, pick pick The Last American Vagabond. Tell everybody where they can get it. Tell everybody how they can get it, whether audio. You can go on their website. Tell everybody.
Thanks, man. I appreciate that kind words. So basically the website again was where you can access all of the written content as well as any of the videos, my show called The Daily Wrap Up, and great interviews being put out by Taylor Hudak and everybody else involved in the team. Just under the About Us, you'll be able to see the team and everything. But we have the audio version as well. So we have our podcast. I put out that every day as well. So underneath all of my shows, you'll see the audio bar where you can download the actual audio itself, but you get the video version as well. So we have, it's multimedia platform. We have all sorts of different content that comes out. And we've started other side things as well. I've got a Freedom Cell thing. I'm going to try to lean more into for the local Tennessee area. Again, all that's on the website. And so just reach out. There's a way to contact us as well. But thanks for having me on, brother. I enjoyed the conversation.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for taking the time. It's nice to have some people who are extremely knowledgeable on particularly foreign politics and wars and things like that. I know that's a heavy topic that you cover. So, I thank you for coming on. Folks, get over there to The Last American Vagabond. And anybody who's a fan of Ryan's, you better fucking get over to mine. This is what I do. I lure people who are a lot smarter than me onto my show under the guise of actually wanting to have a meaningful conversation. But really, I'm just trying to suck the audience into my audience. That's what I'm doing. I want attention.
There you go. Transparently. I like it.
Anybody who doesn't know my show, thank you for listening. To my fans, thank you for listening. And we'll have to do it again.
Yeah, absolutely, brother. Looking forward to it.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Thanks, guys.